I've only had to use violence for necessary defense. And I've certainly never used it to take a life.
No. You can't tell me that some poor bastard who was out on a smoke break or eating a bagel in front of their office building didn't die as soon as this shit happened. They're snowed in for life. I know, this movie came out in 2018. Where have I been? The truth is, I tend to think about things long after they've ended, and movies are no exception. Incredibles 2 has had some polarizing reviews since its release, like most movies do. I've watched it several times at this point. I've even sat down sometimes just to focus on color theory, and I have to say, I like the film well enough. I definitely went in with high expectations because the first one is my favorite Pixar film ever made, right beside one of the darkest movies I've ever seen in my entire life. WALL-E. I told you, I like horror movies. So, why can't I just let go and fall in love with Incredibles 2?
Screenslayer interrupts this program for an important announcement.
Watching Evelyn get shot out of a plane was my favorite part of this kid's movie. Because I don't like her. Let's rip this apart. If you strongly disagree with my assessment of this movie, we can go out in the parking lot and fight about it.
I'll have you know I stubbed my toe last week while watering my spice garden, and I only cried for 20 minutes.
So much of Incredibles 2 is done well. I really love the role reversal for Elastigirl and Mr. Incredible in this movie. Bob already had his midlife crisis, and seeing how badass Elastigirl was in the first movie, it was a smart move to have her take center stage. A lot of this movie's conflict comes from a desire to change things in the political and social climates of the country. So having female, non-binary, and other characters whose government has yet to arrive for them makes sense. I like the way they handled a lot of the family arcs in this movie too. Sequels have a tendency to rewrite characters so they can do something different, and then the overarching story lacks cohesion. But Incredibles 2 handles this transition with grace. Bob and Helen still have similar stances on how to raise their kids and make decisions for the family. Bob is more passionate about their powers and the glorious change that they can bring to the world, while Helen still favors a more grounded approach, and she sees her family as more than genetically bound superheroes. Dash, Violet, and Jack all grow in this movie too. Dash is probably the weakest, but even then, all of their problems aren't just about their powers anymore. Helen is right. There's more to their children than their abilities, and Bob learns this firsthand when he's thrust into taking care of them on his own.
Oh my god.
Side note, Violet is one of the best parts of this movie. Every time she's on screen, I feel a pang in my chest as I'm transported back to my time as an adolescent. I never want kids, but I can appreciate the way this movie uses the family's dynamic, and I would argue that it's done even better in this film than in the original. The aesthetic of the movie and the animation is obviously sharper, given that 14 years passed between each installment, but even this change tells a story. The second movie isn't set in a completely different world, but it's far more vibrant than the first. The Parr family's life as a whole is more vibrant than it used to be, as is the rest of the country now that supers are coming out of hiding and showing the world their true colors. Those types of comments, people, are what I went into debt for. Now I have a degree in theater arts and English, and I have no money. And I'm sad and alone with just my dog.
It's 11, here we come!
Honestly, my first impressions of this movie were skyrocketing. I was really enjoying it. That was until Evelyn turned around and fucked all up. I really love Catherine Keener, and she does a wonderful job voicing this character. The voice acting and look of Evelyn are easily the best parts. I just wish that she had more substance overall, and frankly a better reason for being the villain in the first place. Also, her name, Evelyn Dever. That's as subtle as a sledgehammer to the face. What pisses me off so much about her is just how much of a syndrome she's trying to be. I'm not breaking new ground when I say Syndrome is one of, if not the best Pixar villains they've ever made. What makes him so great? Well, From the beginning, right when we first see him, it's clear that Buddy is an outcast. His costume is handmade, and he likely put a lot of time into it. But even with his best efforts, it still has a poorly cut out cape and gloves. He has crooked teeth, big ears, and he still has baby fat. All of this is normal for a child his age, but kids are cruel and they suck, so it's safe to assume that he's been bullied a lot. What makes Buddy so unique and a threat is his intelligence. Sadly, smart kids or teachers' pets don't fare much better in school, especially when someone is as smart as Buddy is. I doubt even some adults in his life can fully support him, even if they want to. I get the vibe that Buddy's parents are pretty absent, considering that he manages to run around the city with an adult man who can blast through walls with a sneeze. Even when Bob mentions telling his mother what he's been up to, we never see her in the film, or a reaction shot from Buddy like he knows he's going to get in trouble. To be fair, I doubt they could find a book at Barnes & Noble that would help you talk to your kid about 0 point energy. Still, for a child to idolize someone like Mr. Incredible to the extent that Buddy does, I don't think he has anyone else to really look up to. He's willing to risk his life for a superhero that he doesn't even know. So, we have an incredibly, smart kid who's isolated because of a superior ability and just wants to connect with someone who might understand. Worse, this is just before supers are sent into hiding. Mr. Incredible just busted through a building and has broken a ton of shit. Yet, he's rewarded for his destructive behavior because it's all for the greater good.
We are talking about the greater good!
Greater good? I am your wife! I'm the greatest good you are ever gonna get!
Buddy isn't. He's punished and then told to just go home. He shouldn't be encouraged to put himself in danger, certainly, but no wonder he's heartbroken. The saddest part of Buddy's story is that he had the potential to contribute to the greater good, but no one ever told him that. He'd likely be able to do more than even superheroes could. So, how about Evelyn? I'm not saying losing your parents isn't a traumatizing thing. I don't even think they needed to cut out the dead parent cliche for this movie. My problem is the way they use it. Evelyn is mad at supers for not saving her family. Honestly, Evelyn, your father was kind of an idiot. This was really disappointing to me because I wanted Evelyn to have a tragic backstory. Instead, all of it feels very...
I was born with glass bones and paper skin. Every morning I break my legs. And every afternoon I break my arms. At night, I lie awake in agony until my heart attacks put me to sleep.
To me. I also hate Evelyn's plan. It completely falls apart under close inspection. She's trying to legalize supers to destroy people's trust in them, to make them permanently illegal. What? I think Evelyn would have been way more compelling as a villain if she had powers herself. I think the stakes would have been higher, and I think they would have given themselves more layers of conflict to explore. Why? Here are my reasons. I call bullshit that every person in the Incredibles universe who has superpowers is morally righteous and on the side of the good guys. Does this bother anyone else? No? How? Every single one of these people is clinically sane and willing to help society? I know we haven't seen any overlap with powers, but if there are people in this world who can turn themselves invisible, not one of them has tried to rob a bank, or even just a 7-Eleven to take some Slim Jims and hair scrunchies. We already saw a fight between a super and a regular person who was intelligent and used technology. We already had an us versus them dynamic. They did all of this in the first movie. Why not tackle infighting for the super community? This is an entire group of people who have been ostracized by society, and we know from Bob and Gazerbeam, as well as many others, that adjusting to civilian life was very hard. None of these people are jaded or pissed at the government. I would think that supers fighting for their rights again and making some headway would cause a supervillain to become emboldened. Bob and Helen were young when they were forced to hang up their capes. What about a super who was a bit older and has no life skills? They spent time saving the world. They didn't have time to learn how to code or use Adobe products. If they didn't want to make Evelyn older, she could have still had the deaths of her parents as a motivator. Maybe when the law was passed, Evelyn couldn't hone her skills and abilities. Thus, she was unable to save her parents when their house was broken into. Her powers could have even involved technology. She could have been just like that girl from Sky High. Come on, Disney, try it. It's not like you've avoided ripping off your own content before. A lot of what they did wouldn't need to be scrapped. They could have echoed the very sentiment of Syndrome, his genius not being respected, but then they could have added the emotional weight of showing how there are in fact supers out there who dealt with a lot of the same life-altering struggles that he did. Fighting a fellow superhero would also add more weight to Bob and Helen's argument from earlier. They wouldn't just need to think about the morals and values they want to embrace for their children's benefit, but for their peers. It would be devastating, especially after all the superheroes who died in the first movie, to see someone tarnishing the reputation of supers via their own actions. Helen's argument with Evelyn, where she laments how much she trusted her, would have hit a lot harder. I also think it'd be interesting to explore how the world of The Incredibles would attempt to handle deviant behavior from someone with superpowers. Would Evelyn go to jail? Would she even be able to be locked up? Would the only solution be to kill her? Now we're getting into Avatar: The Last Airbender territory. Her attempts to legalize supers would make a lot more sense in this context too, as the law would be benefiting her, not working against her. This world pushes the idea that the passing of this law can only be a good thing, and that something like this can happen with the signing of a paper. But sometimes, laws that exist in society that benefit you aren't always beneficial for others. There's a ton of moral gray area out there, and opening one door can't be done without opening more than one. Maybe Bob and Helen would be forced to question if changing things legally is really the best thing for them and for their children's future. How cool would it have been if Evelyn was an old friend of Helen's, her Frozone, if you will, who she'd have to take down? But alas, we didn't get that with this movie. As I said before, I think there's a lot that Incredibles 2 handled surprisingly well. I can't imagine the stress of penning a script for a movie like this with all the anticipation and knowing that the first movie set such a high standard. But that doesn't make me dislike Evelyn any less. Anyway, that's all I have for you today. If you enjoyed this analysis, please like and subscribe. Links to all of my information is in the description below. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Dark Hearts of Love.